everybody. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for coming to our panel today on crafting comics, art, publishing, and beyond. I'm so excited to be here with our panelists today. I also just wanted to let everyone know about one small change to our panel. Unfortunately, Keezy Young may not be able to make it, so if they're able to make it, they will just come late. But until they do, I will also be answering my own questions since I make graphic novels as well. So I hope Keezy will be able to make it, but please still check out the Charlie's Queer Books booth just down the hall from here because Charlie's will still have their books. So first I wanted to briefly introduce myself and then have each of our lovely panelists introduce themselves as well. My name is Michelle Jing Chan. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a picture book author, illustrator, and also a graphic novelist myself. Some of my more recent books are the first Little Golden book about pride, which is also available at the Charlie's booth. And then the bottom one there is about the winter solstice, and that's my first author, illustrator picture book that just came out. And I also make comics and graphic novels myself. My first graphic novel is called Somewhere in the Gray, and it's about asexuality and Asian dramas and queer found friendships, and it comes out from Macmillan in 2027. And now I would like each of our panelists to introduce themselves as well.
Okay, hi, my name is Mars Lauderbaugh. I am an illustrator, sometimes an author, but not really. And I work primarily in queer fiction, sci-fi, and fantasy. And I do lots of book covers, character art, and recently graphic novels.
And Mars is tabling at the Artist Alley, so check
That's
out
true.
their table
Please
for
come to the
prints
table.
and stickers and things. Yes, and then this is Keezy. I'll leave this slide up briefly so that you can check out some of their beautiful books. Their most recent book just came out, I think about a month ago, and it's called Hello Sunshine. It's sort of a mystery horror graphic novel about a group of queer teens, and one of their friends goes missing, but is he really missing? Is he dead? You'll have to read the book to find out, and you can also grab that at Charlie's Queer Books table, as I mentioned.
Hey, my name is Gigi Murakami. My pronouns are she, her. I am a two-time award nominated, hopefully winning next time, but nominated horror manga artist and illustrator. Best known for my work Resenter, which was published by Viz. I also created a horror graphic novel with Abrams Books called Sinister Sisters through the Are You Afraid of the Dark IP. And I've also self-published a handful of horror one-shots.
Thank you so much, Mars and Gigi, for being here on our panel. So the first question I have is, how did you get your start into the comics industry?
Let me start. I got introduced through, I started with working with authors with character art and book covers, and it wasn't until I first got an agent that I realized I could be doing graphic novels. I got an agent and they were like, hey, have you ever considered doing this? And I was like, I didn't realize I was a person that could do that. Between, like having a day job and doing illustration, comics and graphic novels wasn't something that I had like the bandwidth for. And then someone was like, here, you actually do have that opportunity. And I was like, okay, and now I do.
Yeah, if you've ever seen an Aiden Thomas book, if we have any Aiden Thomas fans, Mars has done a lot of Aiden's covers. And if you want to see more of that kind of art, you'll be very excited for their graphic novel.
Yeah, so for me, I was making comics when I was a kid, but I didn't really know what they were, kind of. Like, I kind of knew, but narrative comics, not so much. I would, read a lot of, Sunday funnies. So the first narrative stories that I started reading was, honestly, just manga. And that was what I really wanted to do, but I thought that I couldn't. So even though I had done comics as a kid, and in high school, my major was in cartooning, I actually didn't start getting into comics professionally until maybe 2018. I started, I went into comics and I like started with the idea that I was gonna self-publish. And I got very serious about it and I made an LLC, but I didn't quite start working into comics technically until maybe like 2020 during the pandemic, when I had time to like kind of like fill the gaps in my skill at that time. Yeah, so I would say about then. Yeah, it's been like a really weird road, but I started self-publishing and then started to kind of trickle into traditional publishing that way.
I think that's something that's really cool about the comics industry, though, is that there's a lot of different avenues to get in, and there's a whole sort of culture around self-publishing and a community around that, too. And I think similar to the two of you, my journey into comics and graphic novels was similarly kind of windy, where I didn't start out necessarily in that. I started out in picture books, like I said, and was doing that, but then, similar to what both of you said, I sort of started reading graphic novels and realizing what comics could be more than just the Sunday funny strips that you see in the newspaper, and then also realized that I had longer and more complex and deeper stories to tell that were for an audience that was older than picture books. So that's kind of how I got into it as well. And then I was wondering where you start once you have an idea for a new comic. What is your process like? What programs do you use? And where do you go after you first get that new idea?
I am a very characters first person, so I will, characters come to me first, and then once I have those characters, it's, you know, what's their problem, and then I flesh out the world from there. And then process, I would say, is like pretty standard. I script everything out. I usually skip thumbnailing, and I go straight to pencils. Between like pencils and inks, I have a breakdown where I completely redo the script, and then to colors and finish it out. It's that I like to compare it to the Great British Bake Off meme, where it's the guy and he's like started making it, how to break down Bon Appetit.
That's a very helpful visual.
I love that. So the way that I start depends on if I'm gonna make a longer narrative story or if I'm gonna make a short one-shot. So for my one-shots, I will just kind of go page by page. Usually these are less than 10 pages, and it's a little less character-driven. It's more like an idea of like what would go wrong if this thing happened or whatever in a horrific way. But for longer narratives, I typically outline. I don't really go through scripts first. I do no scripting. I will outline. I have like a sentence idea of like what I have in mind for the story, maybe like a sentence for like what the theme is gonna be, and then I pretty much outline the rest, and the majority of the work, the bulk of my work goes in my thumbnails. So I will thumbnail everything out. And in that process, I'm figuring out my panel composition. I'm also figuring out my dialogue at that time. And then from there, I will go pencils and then into inks. And then for color, it's kind of up in the air, but I typically use like Clip Studio Paint as a program. And I'll do my colors in there too. Sometimes Photoshop, but usually Clip Studio Paint.
I'm also Clip Studio. I
Okay.
forgot to mention that.
No worries. I was going to ask that too. I too am a CSP, Clip Studio Paint user. I have a follow-up question for Gigi, and then I was going to also briefly walk through some of the terms that we have been throwing around about the general process in case any of that is unclear. So let me tee that up first. So generally for most comics folks, the way that the process goes is you start with some sort of outline, and then from there you're moving into writing a script. So unlike prose novels that start with a full manuscript of complete sentences, the script is more like a movie script with, you know, some stage direction and mostly dialogue on what the characters are saying and things. And from that script, you then move into, you heard Mars and Gigi mention thumbnails. Those are basically like really rough, sort of like almost stick figures sometimes that just tell you the composition of where things are. From thumbnails, most people will move to pencils, and those are sketches. You're refining those stick figure drawings more and putting more detail. And then you heard both of them mention inks, which is where you're doing the actual line art that people will see in the final book. And then lastly is some sort of color stage and the stage that we call lettering, where you're putting in all the speech bubbles. So that's just a kind of overview of the standard process for a lot of folks. But my follow-up question for Gigi is, because you said that you don't typically have a full script and you're figuring out the dialogue as you're thumbnailing, how do you deal with revisions, or if you're changing something major in the story, is it a lot of extra labor for you to go back and change all that in your thumbnails?
Not really. If I am self-publishing it, then unless I leave the thumbnails and then come back and realize like something about this moment is not working, then I'll switch it up. And in those moments, it's not really a big deal. If I'm working with an editor, then that's a different story. I've worked with both Japanese editors and American editors. American editors are not so picky about those things, unless it's like there's certain words or terms that might be either inappropriate or above grade level. My Japanese editor was way more on it about like those kind of like any other changes, like very specific about what changes that he wanted to see. But otherwise, I don't really have too much of an issue. I just keep my stuff on a separate layer and like, you know, adjust as needed. So yeah, I never really have an issue with it. I kind of like it. It feels like as I'm going through the thumbnails, there is like a movie actively playing as I'm going through it, so yeah.
No, thanks for that context. I think I was curious about that for myself, because for my own process, I follow more or less what Mars does too. We're starting with a script and then skipping thumbnails, going to that pencil sketch stage, and then inks and the rest. So that's why I was curious to hear how that differed. But then one follow-up question for Mars too on your process is, how long does it take you to do each stage then, because you're skipping thumbnails and going straight from your script to your pencils?
That's a good question.
That's what I want to know also. That sounds scary to me.
I usually, depending on how long it is, it's 3 or 4 months for sketches. And I do this full time, so I don't have to worry about a day job. So 3 or 4 months for sketches, if it's around 200 to 250 pages. And then inks, if I don't like have a breakdown mid-inks and add 50 pages, it's usually 4 or 5 months, and then colors is the big like 6-month like chunk of time where I am.
And then follow up, well, this is the next question, but how long does it usually take each of you to make a graphic novel in your case, and then a manga in your case? Because comics, I think it's hard for some people to realize this until you are making it yourself. I certainly didn't as just a fan and enjoyer of comics until I started making my own graphic novel. But comics are a huge labor of love. And at least for me, between the time when I first sold my graphic novel to the time it's coming out, it will have been 4 years. So I'm curious for the two of you, what is your timeline for making a graphic novel and a manga?
For like the whole thing, not counting like the editing time and the time that is in production, usually a year and a half for something that's like 200 to 300 pages, which I think it breaks down to one page is like 8 to 10 hours of work. But yeah.
So in my case, it differs. It really just depends on how long the manga is going to be. I don't have like a completed series just yet, so it's mostly one-shots, and I have, what do you call this? Like a prototype, sort of chapter 1 of a longer series that I'm working on. And that initial chapter took me maybe like 2 years to do, and this was like my first big project that I had worked on. I've gotten much faster since then. But the only graphic novel that I worked on has been Sinister Sisters, and that was about, I want to say like 80 pages for the anthology that I've worked on, and I got that done. It felt slow at the time because I was brought onto the project later, replacing another artist. So I didn't have very much time to get my work done, but I think I got that done in maybe, I want to say 6 or 7 months. And that was like, it's fast in hindsight, but it was very like slow at the time. And I did all of that analog. I painted and drew and inked everything analog. I would not do that again though, because I I was working on the one shot for Resenter at the same time as I was working on that graphic novel for Sinister Sisters, and I did not sleep for 2 months. So do not do that. Don't do that. But it varies. I would say it varies. Anywhere from like 7 months to 2 years.
I love how both Mars and I winced when you said you did it all traditionally.
That is a ton of work.
Yeah. Well, and on that note too, this is something that I am always curious about when I talk to other comic artists or graphic novelists. As a graphic novelist myself, I have struggled on and off with chronic pain in my wrist, arms, back, that kind of thing. And anecdotally, every single person I know who works in comics has had some sort of chronic pain with back, arm, neck problems, just again, based on the sheer amount of labor that goes into making comics. So I'm wondering for each of you, have you experienced any chronic pain in that department? And if so, what are some of the techniques that have helped you take care of your physical health as you're working on such massive projects?
Sorry. I was going to say, I actually have a chronic illness. I don't talk about it much publicly, but I have Crohn's disease. So since I was about 15 or 16, I have grown up dealing with chronic issues outside of comics that come in different types of forms. That's just how, an autoimmune disease works. But because of that, I am very sensitive to the changes in my body. So something that I've noticed, the more that I am working on manga and comics, the more that I'm at my desk, the more that I feel my body sort of become inflamed. I can feel it as it's going. Something that I noticed quite recently was some pain in my left hip. So that's been kind of annoying. It comes and goes. I find that stretching every day, having some sort of like stretch in the hips, especially opening up my hips helps a lot. Another thing that I've been doing as I've been really like getting into my work, I will lean on my right elbow as I'm trying to like get things done, and my my back, like my mid like shoulder blade will start really, really like it'll pinch like that, and I've never felt that kind of pain before. And I was like, oh no, we cannot do that. So it has actively taught me to like straighten up my posture, make sure that I am gonna lean, that I have a soft area to lean at. I'm not leaning for too long. And to try to take a break every once in a while and get up and move around. But absolutely, absolutely stretch every day. It's definitely kept me in the gym like more consistently than I normally would be.
It's funny because I do the same thing with the lean.
Yeah, it's comfortable at the time.
At the time.
In the moment.
Then you stand up and you're like, oof. I also, my back, I started graphic novels in 2020, and the last 5 years, my posture has become horrible. I am like a little shrimp now. I would say invest in foam rollers if you are any kind of person who spends like a long period of time sitting at a computer. And then, stretching every day is super important. And even if you're not someone who, like, I hate stretching, but just getting up and like walking a lap around your house or walking a lap around your neighborhood and getting away from your computer is really important. That, and when you are someone, again, who works every day at a computer, take your weekends, get up and do something and go outside on your weekends, please. Your body will thank you.
Can I just add to that also, like, because you mentioned foam roller and it like lit up a spark. I recently got cushions for my chairs, and that's been a game changer. Like I got like a back cushion and a seat cushion, and that's also helped me to be more in tune with my body, to know that like when I'm leaning the wrong way or my hip is starting to feel like a little inflamed.
I really relate to what both of you said, though, about just making sure you have all the ergonomic equipment you need to at home to make your setup as optimized for you and what you need as much as possible. I think when I think about that question myself, that's the thing that's helped me the most. Also, I think I got this advice from another panelist last year, Ngozi Ukazu and Mad Rupert. I was talking to them after that panel last year about ergonomic things, and they said you should treat your body like you're an athlete because, again, comics is such a labor of love that it really is a marathon. So advice I need to take better myself, but... And then I'm wondering what would be a dream project for each of you to work on. Let's manifest this into the world.
Oh man. I am obligated to say some sort of collaborative project with Junji Ito would be crazy. I would actually die. And I feel like I'm so close. I'm so close to getting that, and it's like I don't know if I'll get there. I'll have to meet him first, but I'm so close to even just meeting him. He followed me on Twitter. Yeah. Thank you. I didn't do anything, but yeah. So one of these days, maybe that'll be like I'm putting it out there that maybe we could do something. Even if we did like I don't know, making freaking t-shirts or something. I don't know. Something with him would be cool.
Everybody needs to go at Junji Ito and tell him to collab with you.
Thank you.
I don't think I have a specific name or anything, but I would love to do something that is largely collaborative and maybe multimedia. Like, I really love music, so I would love to do something that incorporates music, which I don't know how you would do that in a graphic novel, but it's something I would like to do when I figure it out.
That would be really cool. I have seen Dan Sandhat's graphic novel, A First Time for Everything. It's about like his memoir of traveling through Europe when he was in middle school. And in the front of the book, he does have a like QR code to go to a Spotify playlist. And it also has a bunch of media from his actual trip. So that, free idea for you.
Can I just ask a question for you, Mars? Do you make playlists for your stories as you're going through them?
I do. They're not very long, but I nerd out and I go through and I make playlists. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Same. Yeah.
Put that in a QR code in the back of your book.
This is true. Good marketing.
Yeah. And then I'm also wondering, what advice do you have for somebody who's trying to break into comics?
This one was a hard one, just because comics it's both hard and I don't want to say it's easy, but it's something that honestly make friends with people who are in comics, share your work. I know that's anybody would say that about any industry, but find maybe other avenues of getting in that's not like strictly comics. Meet authors who write scripts and work with them, or meet authors who write books and do work for them, or post your own original characters, and finding like a community of people who champion your work and then who you can champion their work, I think is, when one of you succeeds, they can pull you up and vice versa. And I think that's how I got in, so I think that's a pretty good way to do it.
Yeah, I agree with networking and making friends within the community. I find that whenever I have been down, my network has always supported me. So I think that that's a very important point to take away from. For me, I feel like I started like so kind of, it's not like the normal way that you start. Being in the age of like social media, I think it is also good to like show your work online within that community. But I also think, and this might be a little controversial, but I also think that it's a good idea to make what you're gonna make regardless if you are gonna pitch it to a publisher or not. I think that because now that we have social media and we have like access to the internet and we can talk to so many different people across the world, I think it's a good idea to utilize that when you're making your work, so that you have the audience there. You can just make it, and don't I would say don't let traditional publishing bully you into like you can only go with them. I find that sometimes that's sometimes the attitude, not like in a very malicious way. Like nobody's like, nobody's yelling at you or anything, but it is a very passive way of like, this idea that if you don't publish with us or if you don't publish within this particular space, your stuff is not valid or it's not real. And I find that couldn't be further from the truth for me. I find that when I was self-publishing, that was when I was getting the most attention. But I was just also like doing my own thing. So when the traditional publishers find that you are kind of like in your own bubble, you're finding success, sharing your work and talking about your work in your own space, they tend to be like, "Huh, what's going on over there? What are you up to?" And then they reach out to you and they want to know more about what you're doing. That's a good position to be in, and I would say don't take that for granted, and also stand your ground professionally and courteously, but stand your ground if like something is like, if it's not something that you're super interested in that they're offering, or if not to get into the weeds of it, but yeah, just make sure you stand your ground, and your work is your work, and yeah.
No, I think that's great advice. I think especially, all of us share different marginalized identities and have different marginalized identities. And, I think in the comics industry and in publishing in general, there is a lot of learning to be your own advocate and sticking true to your values and the way that you see a story going and the way that you want your characters to be represented. So I completely agree with that. I also completely agree with both of your advice about finding a community of people. I think comics can be really isolating sometimes. You're working for many hours alone in your room, shrimping over your computer or tablet, and 100% agree that comics people are the best and so communal and reciprocal. I have a follow-up question on that, which is, how would you recommend that people go and find different comics communities? I will start really quick by chiming in with something that I think helped me, is going to comics festivals. In the, Gigi can speak to the Brooklyn area, but at least for Mars and I in the Seattle area, there's a lot of comics festivals in the Pacific Northwest, and a lot of them are free to get in. For example, just a couple weekends ago, Short Run Comics Festival was happening in Seattle. It happens every year and was at the Seattle Design Center in Georgetown this year. So there were a bunch of different vendors and comics artists, and that was a great way to just go and meet other artists, get advice, see what other people are working on. And another one that I also want to plug is VanCaf. It's the Vancouver Comic Arts Festival happening July 4th weekend in 2026. I'm not affiliated or anything, just a fan. But actually visiting VanCaf on the drive back was when me and my friend Marina, who's in the audience, workshopped and worked on like the first draft of my own graphic novel. So I'm plugging all the local comics festivals in the Pacific Northwest. But yeah, do either of you have any other specific advice of, where people can start to build and find that comics community?
Just because it worked for me, I would go like by way of fandom. There are a lot of fan artists and illustrators and writers who make fan comics. And I think going into those spaces and, you already have something that you both like, you both have in common, being able to collaborate with people like that and more or less play in somebody else's sandbox together is, I think, a really good way to get into it and get not necessarily professional experience, but still the experience of making things with other people and just making comics.
That is a really good point. I always forget about fandoms and conventions because I've gotten this question before, but that's a really good point. That is also something that I mean, obviously conventions, but fandom is like, oh yeah, I am a fan of things. I do draw stuff. For me, the way that I have found my community, because I went to school for art in high school, I started with my close friends in high school, and that kind of progressed on to conventions. But then more recently, as I have committed to working in manga and comics, it's been online. I am online a lot, sorry. I really like going like live and stuff like that to different people's lives, finding different artists there. YouTube as well, like finding different artists within that area. Discord as well has been nice to find different artists as well. It used to be Twitter where you could find some artists to like network with and go to their Discord or go to their lives or whatever. I feel like that community has kind of migrated to Blue Sky now, but used to be. But yeah, those would be the spots that I would go to. I guess outside of Blue Sky, probably Instagram too. Those are the spots where I mostly find my community, to be honest, yeah, in recent times.
Yeah, rip to Twitter.
Yeah.
And then I know I'm going slightly off script here, but because we have time, I have one more question that I want to know from you two, and then we'll open it up to some audience questions. But I'm wondering, because we all kind of, at least Mars and I got our start in something outside of comics, and Gigi, because you've worked in both graphic novels with Western publishers and then also manga with Japanese publishers, I'm wondering for both of you how that differed. For you, how did working with Western publishers differ from working with Japanese manga publishers? And then for you, Mars, when you migrated from doing cover art to graphic novels, how was that different? And what are some of the skills that each of you took from where you started to the comics realm?
Oh man, to date I have worked with, I've worked with Abrams. I don't know if I can say the other one, but the announcement has been made already that I worked with Boom Studios for Hello Darkness. I've worked with a few other American editors, and they are so easy to work with compared to Japanese editors. American editors just want to make sure that you are on the deadline, your art's good, your files are manageable so that like the letterer can get to do, or the colorist can get to where they need to go. And that's it. If you have that, you are home free. You may like have maybe a single piece of artwork that you might have to update, but otherwise they're like, oh, I love it. This looks good. Just send it on. Yeah, thanks. When I was working with my editor, Hisashi Sasaki, over at Viz, there was a lot. We had very long meetings talking about what revisions I needed to do for Resenter, but also because even though like manga and comics, they are the same medium, stylistically they're different, and there are different traits that each of those mediums have. And so even though I was a big fan of manga and I read a lot of manga, there were still certain things that as a creator I didn't know how to apply, and he helped me a lot with that. But even on top of that, his editing process was very, very thorough. A lot of questions were being asked. And it put me in a position where I had to be very sure about what this story was gonna be about, because he asked me everything. And if if it wasn't clear to him, I'd have to rework a few things. I was lucky enough that when I worked with him for Resenter, we have to do our storyboards. In Japanese, it's called name, which is just name, but I don't know why they say it like that or why they use the word name, but when I submitted my first name, it got rejected, and then I submitted my second, and it was greenlit, good to go, and I just had to work on the final for publication. I had a friend who was also in the program with me. I think their name got rejected about 7 times. I was so lucky I didn't have that problem. But that like gives you an idea of how thorough the editorial process is with Japanese editors. It's scary. It's very scary.
I had no idea. It was interesting because my impression was that it was maybe the opposite, and there was more freedom for you to write whatever on the manga side. So that was interesting for me to learn too.
There is a bit of freedom as far as like what type of story do you want to tell, right? Like you can basically tell any sort of story. There is like a little bit of a formula that it has to be in though, but as long as that sits in that formula, you can basically say whatever you want. It just has to be at the highest quality that it can be for them to feel like we can move on.
I actually have a follow-up question for you, Gigi.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference, like between like American editors and Japanese editors? Do you have a Do you prefer one over the other?
I do prefer working with a Japanese editor. It feels like somebody's holding your hand a little bit. Whereas with American editors, because everything is so like deadline oriented, it just feels like you're a cog in a machine, or like you're one part of the line on the conveyor belt, and it's just, let me just pump these things out as quickly as possible. And for some people, that's fine. And in some cases, even for me, like, that's fine. Like, if I just need a check, it is what it is. But especially from my own stories that I want to tell, and not anything that I'm being hired for as, like, an artist or an inker or whatever, then, yeah, that level of, like, you know, of specificity and that thorough editing is comforting to me. And it almost feels like, not almost, it actually did feel like in a lot of those meetings, which would last from like 30 minutes to an hour, maybe hour and a half, where I'm just talking to him, it's fun because we're world building and we're story building at the same time. And it's like a conversation you would have with another comic artist, or like, you know, even in like a sort of fandom sort of way, like talking about like this thing happened and like, that's so cool. What if this thing, blah, blah, blah. Like that is the environment that you're in. So it's very creatively fulfilling and like nourishing. Yeah.
Sorry. I was just going to say really quick, I think that's why it goes back to like why community is so important. I think I've seen that experience too, sometimes on the Western publisher side. And I think that's why it's so important to have comics community, because those are the people who you can workshop things with and who will give that same level of attention and detail to your story when sometimes your editor might be too overworked to do that.
I agree with that, yeah.
And then Mars? How, no worries. How has your work in cover art kind of informed, or any of the skills you took over from that into making graphic novels, and how do they differ?
I think the biggest difference is that, like, working with cover art, you are you're working for on somebody else's work, and it's you are told exactly what they want you to draw. You are told exactly, sometimes right down to the colors they want you to include. So it's a very, like, they give you an art brief and you do it, and they have full control over like every minor detail, which is fine. I like that. And then for graphic novels, I write and I draw all my stuff. So I have full creative control, and it's an American editor, so they're very, I love my editor so much. She's so great. But I do oftentimes find myself like, anything else? Anything else you want to tell me?
Is this okay?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the biggest difference. And then I've learned the most that you have to, the amount of work that goes into cover art versus, as far as like detail, versus the amount of work that goes into pages of a graphic novel is vastly different in terms of, like, I cannot flesh out a graphic novel to the extent that I would flesh out a cover, because I have to keep going. Yeah. Like, I can only spend so much time before it needs to be the next page.
Yeah, I agree. And I was going to say for picture books, it's the exact same thing that I've learned, where for picture books, they're only 24 to 32 pages, so every single page has a certain level of detail and color with it. But for graphic novels, I think a lot of the skill is learning to abstract away details in the background, where you might be able to zoom in on your iPad and see every single detail, but when someone's reading a book and looking at it in print on a tiny little panel, the detail that you spent 15 minutes working on in the background, they're not even going to see. So same here. And then before we open it up to audience questions, I was going to ask if each of you had something you want to plug. What's your next project? What are you working on?
So my debut graphic novel, Hollow Magic, comes out August 11th, 2026. So keep an eye out for that. It's up on Goodreads. I know it's available for request on NetGalley for advanced reader copies. And then if you're local to Seattle, I'll be doing like little events here and then down in Portland around August for launch.
Cool. Looking forward to your book. So for me, as I mentioned before, Resenter is my main work. I'm getting that ready for some things. I don't have any dates just yet for that, but please follow my socials to keep an eye out for that. But something concrete that I can sort of announce today, This is not publishing related, so it's a little awkward, but I am art lead for a horror anime project called Weeby. Also on my socials, it's by the animation company Enlight, and it's going to be really, really cool. We have Willow Smith playing the voice for one of our characters, one of the characters that I will be designing. And yeah, we have Peter Ramsey on board for it as well, and Koji Morimoto will also be directing, or co-directing the story. So we're getting it into production, so it should be done in like the next 2 years. But yes, please follow my socials to stay updated on that. Thank you.
Wow, congratulations. That's so exciting.
Thank
And also,
you.
Mars, I'm very excited for all of your events and happy that you're local so I can go to them. Yeah, and then for me, I have a lot of picture book events going on. I do a lot of story time, so if you have little kids around. And then, as I said, my graphic novel comes out in 2027. So thank you so much for your time for both Gigi and Mars. And now I'd like to open it up to any audience questions. Yes.
Bringing that process back to something that's...
Oh, I can repeat the question.
Yeah,
So,
sorry.
no, all good. So the question was, after working with a Japanese editor, are you able to take things from that process and apply it to working with an American editor?
Not so much. I've been able to take that and apply it to my own stuff, things that I'm self-publishing, or things that I may be pitching again to the same editor or to any other Japanese companies. American editors, they just work differently. It's not so much about development. It's more so about, it's almost like project management, making sure that everybody has sort of what they need and like things are moving down the line in a timely manner. So it's a little different. Maybe like after hours, just chatting with an editor, maybe, but in a professional way, I don't think I've been able to do that so much, no.
We also have a Q&A mic with our volunteer here.
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
I'm glad this exists because my throat is very sore. I have a question for you, Michelle. So, if you started in kids' books, right?
Mhm.
So, when you decided to do something that wasn't a kids' book, did you worry, for example, about the material you included, about being appropriate, about maybe going by a different name, anything like that? I'm not asking just because that's something I've worried about myself.
Yeah, that's a good question. No, I think that's a really good question. And I think that it's a question I've had other kidlit friends who started out in picture books or maybe like lower middle grade books and then moved into adult content wonder as well. I think, at least for me, because I already had a body of work attached to my name in picture books, and because my graphic novel is YA, not necessarily adult, I personally didn't feel the need to change up my name for that. Obviously, because the topic of my graphic novel is about asexuality and a queer coming-of-age novel, there are going to be some themes around sex and sexuality and queer identity that are in the novel that, you know, might not be the right range for picture book readers to be able to understand. But I really, truly believe that kids have the intelligence and the emotional capacity to understand pretty much any topic that they're curious about or ask about, and there's an age-appropriate way to explain that to them. So at least for me, not for that, but I think for other friends who moved from kidlit to the adult space, it really sort of varies on a case-by-case basis. I had some friends decide to go by a different name for their adult content, and then other friends who just have the same author name, but just a completely different set of social media profiles. So thanks for your question.
all of you, but how important do you individually think it is to collect content like while you're working to promote yourself? Or is that something that you can just let other people market you if you have a publisher?
I can answer as somebody that does make content about their stuff. Yeah, that's a good question though. So because again, I'm coming from like a self-publishing space, there is no marketing team that I have. I am the marketing team. So I have to think about how am I gonna let people know that I'm making this thing. And it starts from conception. Usually for traditional publishing, you can't, it's starting to lighten up now that social media is becoming a good tool for marketing, but usually you can't show the bare bones of this work, or, you know, even your inks or, you know, some colors or stuff like that. Again, it's lightening up, so you can start showing like a little bit of inks now, but I will start like live streaming and start working on the project as I'm on stream. So it'll start with that. For Resenter in particular, I've made like a trailer for it. I commissioned a friend to make a trailer. I thought that that was exciting. That's a fun way to market. I don't know if people consider that like that can also be a creative venture. But I think when artists are making works, I think marketing kind of gets put in the back burner because you think, oh, the marketing team will handle this. And for some books, for some situations, like, yes, just let the marketing team handle that. But I do think it's a good rule of thumb to, if it's a story that you really love and that you worked really hard on, and you really want it to be successful, to try to make content on it, make reels, TikToks, try to be strategic about it when you have the time and you have the capacity, and try not to think of it as like a drag. Like this is another way to be creative and like lean into that instead of it being like, well, people should just find me because it's done, because it just doesn't work. There's too many things out there that are distracting people these days.
I agree that it should, like, don't think of it as something that is, you know, you have to do, but something that you are, you know, you're sharing something that you love. And I think that even within like traditional publishing, if you are a smaller creator, if you're a newer creator, you don't necessarily know what your marketing team is going to be doing, and what you don't necessarily know what your budget is. I know, like, within my the past few months, I've had stuff going on with Hollow Magic, and I am not told a lot of things. Like my advanced reader copy started going out, and I was the last one to know. So, as far as like making content and doing your own marketing, I would say, like, again, treat it as something that you're excited to share, and just because you don't really know what your team is doing for you, you don't really know what
Or not doing.
we're not doing.
Let's be for real.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here.
One thing I will add, though, is I think it's not worth, if it's going to be negatively affecting your mental health, to stress too much about it. And so I think at the end of the day, post when you feel like you have the spoons for it, share when you feel like you have the spoons for it. But there are plenty of creators, at least in the graphic novel space, who have a tiny following, but their books have done really well, and they're continuing to be on their 7th, 8th, 9th graphic novel. And so I think at the end of the day, what really matters is your craft and your story, and that's what's going to continue getting you work and getting people to want to read your book.
I like your shirt too, by the way.
Any other questions or anything? If not, then I have one more question, because I love talking about comics and asking questions that I'm curious about for you too. But can you give us a recommendation for a manga, graphic novel, comic that you like and that people should go check out? Possibly from Charlie's Queer Books, that is down the hall.
Oh, I don't know what's in Charlie's Queer Books. I'm sorry. That might
That's
have
okay.
to be
That's
coming
okay.
from you guys. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay. Just any other like manga or comics recommendation, and then we can close with that.
Yeah, sure. Something that I've been enjoying, and I recently got volume 2 of, was Atsushi Kaneko's Search and Destroy. So it is a reimagined, kind of like sci-fi dystopian version of Osamu Tezuka's Dororo. And that used to be, it was an anime back in the day, but the way that it's been revamped is the main character, Hyakumaru, or one of the main characters, it used to be like this samurai who like lost all of his body parts and stuff. And now Kaneko Sensei has turned it into a woman who is like this like cyborg kind of thing. So yeah, it's been pretty cool. It's might be a little scary to read these days because, you know, sci-fi dystopia. We're living in a very interesting time right now. But I do think that that manga is scarier, just a tad scarier than what's happening right now. So I think it might be an interesting read for a little bit of catharsis.
I recently read Boy Island by Leo Fox, which I think it came out last year. But it's about the main character is going through this very, I don't know, have you read it?
I've heard of it.
I don't really know how to describe the world, but it's very different from ours. There's two islands. There's Boy Island and there's Girl Island. And the main character lives on Girl Island, is trying to get to Boy Island. And it sounds silly, but it's very, it's got very like heavy metaphors, and it's very, very good.
I need to make note to write these down myself, but I will recommend a manga and then a graphic novel. The manga that I will recommend is The Summer Hikaru Died. Basically, the premise is there's these two boys who are living in this sort of village in Japan, and they're childhood friends. And then one day, one of them goes up this mountain and goes missing, and he comes back, and things are sort of off, and he's acting a little weird. And then weird things start happening in the village. And that also recently just got made into an anime as well. And then the other one I will plug, which I know Charlie's Queer Books has in their store because that's where I got my copy. Charlie's in the back there. Shout out to Charlie and the most beautiful bookstore in Seattle. But is A Guest in the House by E.M. Carroll. It is a sapphic graphic novel with a beautiful color palette. And there's this woman who lives in this house with her new husband and her new stepdaughter. And then again, creepy things start happening. But it's the first time I've been jump scared by a graphic novel.
I love E.M. Carroll. I will say when I arrived at the castle, it was also really good.
Oh, that's a great one too. Yes, any of E.M. Carroll's stuff. But please give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. And then there's no other panel after this in this room. So Charlie himself from Charlie's Queer Books is in the back with copies of, I believe, all of our books for us to sign if anyone wants to pick up a copy. And if not, definitely check out Charlie's booth, which I said is just down the hall and has a bunch of beautiful queer books, or their physical store here in Fremont while you're here for GeekGirlCon. So thank you again for everybody for coming, and hope you enjoy the rest of the con.